I have the perfect book that you have to read. A best friend of mine explained that to me several years ago. And as they explained it to me, I replied by saying, "And what makes that book perfect?" And she smiled and she said, "Well, first of all, it's perfect for you because it's a quick read. It's going to take you less than 2 minutes to read the book. And it's only 5 chapters. And she said, the other thing that makes it perfect is why it teaches us about an important element of who we are as human beings. And thirdly," she went on to say, "it's a perfect book for you because I think you might be able to use it in a homily." "Perfect," I replied. So my friends, today is the day. The book is entitled, "There's a Hole in My Sidewalk." Subtitle, "Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters." Written by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. How many holes do you and I encounter in our sidewalks of living? The paths that we go down, those places where we travel. Certainly we are all mindful of those many holes that we encounter, those holes that are deep. And they are often defined as sins or those temptations that you and I always seem to find our way into. And when we get there, we sometimes are lost, sometimes we feel helpless, and at the beginning, it's never our fault. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe that I am in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Those holes in our sidewalk are persistent, aren't they? They're always there, you and I, why we find ourselves falling into them over and over and over again. These holes, why they have names to them. Sometimes they're called greed, that is shown in the form of selfishness. Sometimes those holes have a name called grudges that we love to hang on to and that we, level against one another so frequently. Perhaps there are other names we can give to these holes. And oftentimes we think it still isn't our fault. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Isn't it amazing what happens when we finally get to the point on the sidewalks that we travel in life, when we finally acknowledge and take responsibility for the holes in the sidewalk? When we can finally move to that point where we can say, yeah, it is my fault. I am an accomplice in what is happening in my daily living. And as we know, once we can not only acknowledge and give a name to the hole, and once we can finally acknowledge and claim our own responsibility and take fault where fault needs to be taken, with it comes freedom. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. See what freedom brings? It enables you and I to have the sight, more importantly, the gift of insight that we need as we travel the sidewalks and the pathways of our everyday living. We begin to recognize those habits, those obstacles, those holes that are part of our daily living that so oftentimes out of habit we choose to go down into, that we fall into, that we can eventually take responsibility for. But then there comes that moment when we realize that there's another option. It involves going around the hole, walking around the obstacle that forces you and I to sin. But notice in all 4 chapters, the holes are still there. And you and I, we're tempted, aren't we? Because the holes are more than just sins that we have in our lives. Those holes come with any loss that we experience in our life. The loss certainly of one we love that is taken from us. There is a void, there is a hole in our lives. The losses that come from retirement or getting older or the loss of one's health, these are holes too that you and I must learn to navigate through and around. We must be willing to become more agile in using our minds to deal with the holes, and the temptation will always be there to fill the hole. And usually the way we try to fill the hole is with some other form of addiction or obsession in our lives. It just creates another hole in the sidewalk. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. And my friends, notice what is missing in the story. The 2 words that are not in the story. And those 2 words are the end. Because Lent is never about the end. Although that's where we begin, is with the end, i.e. being reminded of death. But we know that there is no ending to this story. The holes will always be there. The sidewalks are always waiting for you and I to travel down and to experience in our daily lives. What we need to do is not worry about filling the hole. We need to learn how to walk around them and to go down the street, the path that will lead us through these 40 days to another place, to another street, a street that leads to hope, to promise, to love, and to new life.